Congressman James McGovern and Thomas Massie are leading 16 members of Congress in calling for the United States to drop charges and halt extradition proceedings against publisher and WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Quote, "We clearly have deep concerns about Mr. Assange's case," said the congressman. "People should understand that the charges against him are part of an alarming global trend, a sharp increase in attacks against the freedom of the press that is happening in countries around the world, including our own."
Some other notable names on the bipartisan letter to the Biden administration demanding Assange's prosecution be dropped include Representatives Cori Bush, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Pramila Jayapal, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Paul Gosar, Rand Paul, and many, many more.
So that's a pretty mixed list of some, very vocal people on the left and also very right-wing people and some kind of libertarian-adjacent Republicans who I'm glad to see sticking by principle and all coming together to support this very important cause that we talk about on the show a lot. I know it matters a lot to our viewers. Assange has now been held for years in horrible conditions, now in actually being held in prison now after he was kind of a captive in an embassy for a long time. Now he's in prison. The U.S. has been seeking his extradition. The Biden administration is seeking that, has done nothing for him, and the Trump administration before that, and so on. Even as so many people on all sides of the political spectrum recognize this as about fundamentally free speech and journalism, that Assange did not steal, did not illicitly obtain or commit a crime to obtain the information he obtained. He merely published what he obtained, and that is not a crime. That is not different from anything mainstream journalism tries to accomplish. And he informed the American people that their government was lying to them, spying on them, etc. These were important services for which he deserves commendation. Instead, he's gotten condemnation.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it any better. And it is such an interesting time for this push to drop the charges to be made. We're having so many conversations right now about limitations on speech that are provoked or seem to have been provoked by a desire to shut down dissent around what's going on in the Middle East. You've seen across Europe in particular efforts to ban protests altogether, pro-Palestinian protests, I should say, not pro-Israeli protests. Efforts, Suella Braverman, the official in the UK who was leading the charge on banning displaying Palestinian flags and the like, just lost her job. So there does seem to be a turn that's happening, as I think I mentioned earlier this week, that after making it illegal to take this position, Macron is now demanding a ceasefire as well. So there are shifts that are happening, but let's not forget that the initial impulse over the course of the last month in so many countries, including our own, well, you see this with Ron DeSantis and the infringement on speech and the right of these Palestinian groups to be groups at colleges in Florida. You see this with Kathy Hochul. There is a real censorious atmosphere that's happening in the United States of America. And contrast that with all of the things that we know about our own government's misdeeds abroad and domestically because of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks.
Just on the latest news for the protesters in Florida, the DeSantis thing. So the colleges have decided not to enforce that because they consulted attorneys who said that if you enforce this, probably the administrators who do enforce it can be sued because it would violate the First Amendment. So they decided not to do it.
That's good news.
Yeah. So I went to Rand Paul's Senate page, and he writes of this letter urging Biden to stop taking action against Julian Assange. It's the duty of journalists to seek out sources, including documentary evidence, in order to report to the public on the activities of government. The United States must not pursue an unnecessary prosecution that risks criminalizing common journalistic practices and thus chilling the work of the free press. We urge you to ensure that this case be brought to a close in as timely a manner as possible. And that gets to the crux of this, which is that Julian Assange has been treated as if he's like not a journalist, or the work he's doing is not journalism. But the First Amendment doesn't recognize a journalism credential. You don't need to get a license. You don't need to, anyone engaged in the work of journalism is a journalist. And I think that's why, obviously he's gotten some support in the mainstream media. There have been some calls, people have defended him and called for him to be released. I think there's been an increasing lack of interest in his case from some of and some of that is just it fading from the headlines. I think some of it is his cause actually being taken up by some more right-wing figures. And then seeing as like, oh, this is a right-wing figure because he has he was very anti-Clinton and there's
that was it from the beginning. It felt like I remember a very disappointing interview that AOC did at The Intercept. It would have been, I think, January of 2021, where she was being asked, interviewed by Jeremy Scahill about a lot of things, and kind of a throwaway question toward the end was about Julian Assange. Now, this was not years and years ago before anybody knew about Assange or had time to vet any of the charges against him. Remember there was this Me Too charge against him that put a lot of people off. But she alluded to exactly that, like, oh, I think there's some personal things that he's been through that I don't know that I will. It was like one of these kind of non-answers that was very disappointing at the time. So I agree with you that some of those, political or kind of cultural factors, I think have been a barrier to getting broad public support. But I do feel like most of that is in the rearview window, and that now people see this and are talking about this as a pure speech issue. Especially, I gotta say, since Chelsea Manning's sentence was commuted by Obama, there was this weird asymmetry here between why is it that Julian Assange, the one who's purely in a journalistic capacity, the one that's suffering the bulk of the harm. And even if you thought he deserved some punishment, which I obviously do not, at this point, after he's been punished for years and is in a high security prison right now in the UK, suffering, we talked to his brother recently, from the mental health strain, he has a young family. At what point are you not just gonna let this go? And what are the political costs to not letting him go? It does seem like Biden could use a real win right now. It's not clear what the voter coalition of people who would actually disapprove of this are. So why not also take the opportunity to get a little buy-in, a little trust with your voters?
Trump made it sound like he was possibly going to do it, and then he didn't go through with it. He was a little distracted, I think, following his election loss. Which was a real shame because actually a lot of his supporters wanted him to. Tucker Carlson lobbied for Julian Assange to be freed, talked about it on his show. Actually, and we covered recently, he has now gone to visit Julian Assange, I think, to do an episode about it. So, and Tucker was and is to some extent like the most important conservative commentator. So it seems like it would please a lot of people, and the only downside is annoying like deep state, national security, expert class people who no one likes anyway.
Yeah, I say annoy them.
Annoy them. Proceed. So yeah, really hope to. Obviously, we've been hoping and then being disappointed for a long time. Yeah. But yesterday was the best day to release Julian Assange, and tomorrow is the next best day. So.
Yeah. Let's see if some of these Trump challengers perhaps take up this charge. It could be an interesting way for them to start to distinguish themselves because they're running out of time to make the case as to why they'd be a better candidate than Donald Trump.
I doubt we'll hear anything encouraging from Nikki Haley or Chris Christie on this.
Yeah. Maybe Vivek?
DeSantis, Vivek, I don't know.
Yeah.
We'd have to wait to see. I'd like to know what they think about it. More Rising right after this.